You ever look at yourself in the mirror and not really recognize what you see in the mirror? 2020 was the year that I went crazy. I don't even know what 2021 has been. I've been kind of quiet for a lot in the last half of the year because I've gone through quite a lot. The past 6 months alone has given me challenges that I don't think I could have properly prepared for. And I write this video not knowing exactly where to start. Just a quick heads up. This video is going to have some very heavy stuff in it. We're going to be doing some talk about COVID, and we're also going to be talking about death. Not necessarily both at the same time. So let's start with something that might be obvious by the sound of my voice, I don't know. I came down with a case of COVID, and all of a sudden he could hear a pin drop. I'm okay. I was always going to be okay. I'm on the mend now. There's going to be a million smart aleck guesses as to how this happened, so I'll cut to the chase before there's too much speculation. Earlier this year, some family of mine had lost their homes. And so I invited them into mine. Because they actually have lives and jobs outside the house, they got COVID and tested positive. And I exhibited similar symptoms different from those that I normally get during illnesses. This was person-to-person at-home contact, so karma doesn't apply. Masks or lockdowns would have nothing to do with anything. There was even a breakthrough vaccination case. For the record, the relative who brought COVID in is not vaccinated. For the record, I am not vaccinated. For the record, I have what is often considered a mild case that people often attribute to getting the vaccine. I recorded my symptoms throughout the whole thing if you don't believe me. There was a cough that sounded a lot worse than it is. There was a fever and wild fluctuations in body temperature. And of course, difficulty breathing capped it all off. Feeling as though my nose was stuffed when it wasn't. At no point did I seek medical attention. At no point did I consider seeking medical attention. What I did record is that my case of this disease was not horrible. It was horribly anticlimactic. This was the disease that all of society was obsessing about for the past year and a half. Almost 2 years now. This was a disease that was defining this chapter of my life, now several chapters. I get it, and for me personally, I want to reiterate, for me personally, a case of the flu that I got in early October this year felt worse. You may say that I'm lucky, but that is untrue. If I was lucky, my case would have been completely asymptomatic. If anything, the past 2 years have proven that I am anything but lucky. I am someone who was thrown against his will into a dystopian future. I didn't get lucky. I just didn't get unlucky. I didn't seek medical attention because I am 29 years old. I have no pre-existing conditions. I am not overweight. Those are many of the reasons that I personally chose not to get vaccinated either. There are other reasons, but I don't know how permitted I am to speak of them. One that I think that I can mention is that I have a family history of blood clots. Both my mother and my grandfather got a blood clot. Not during the vaccination, but previously in their lives. And when my grandfather got a blood clot, let me tell you, this normally quiet man screamed so loud, it woke up the entire house. That was a pain that I never even wanted the chance of experiencing. Of my entire family, my case of COVID, at least as far as I can tell, has been the least bad, or the most mild. My brother and his girlfriend got it, I think, last year, sometimes before vaccines were even available. According to him, he got pretty sick, one of the worst illnesses that he's ever had. The relatives staying with me got hit worse than I did too, although still not enough to consider seeking medical attention. There's only one person in my family who needed to seek medical attention for COVID. And this was months ago, completely unrelated to this event, and that was my mother. It must have been maybe early summer. She did need to go to the hospital because of trouble breathing, and for a few days I was definitely worried. She got better though, went through treatment, was COVID negative, and then she was on her feet for the next couple of months. And then she died towards the end of October of an apparent drug overdose. Life plays a lot of funny games on you. Like, you have to realize that life is a comedy. It wants to be funny, just with you as the punchline. My mother was not someone who was in the best health to begin with. She gets into the pandemic and she gets the disease, and then she lives, and then she dies of something else just a scant few months later. And now that was actually the second funeral that we had to plan that week. And no, the other person didn't die of COVID either, but I'm getting ahead of myself. One thing that I've noticed in the past couple of months is that we as a society are repeating the same mistakes that we used to. This happens during every pandemic, really. It's where we get the term leper, where people take revelry in people dying or coming to consequence because of their own choices that are deemed not morally acceptable by the puritanical collective. I know for a fact that should the less than 1,000th of 1% that something actually did happen to me, I'd probably make a pretty popular post on the subreddit Herman Cain Awards, where very moral people like to scapegoat and mock the dead. But it's like Joe Biden says, the President of the United States, The unvaccinated are taking up all of our health supplies. The ones that society has had 2 full years to get prepared. That he has personally had 11 months to get into shape. Wait until he learns how many medical supplies the overweight are disparately taking up. Oh boy, it's gonna be a field day when that discovery is made by these people. I can tell you that. No, I know what this is, and I hate that it seems to be working. No, don't blame the government for taking your rights. Blame the people who aren't listening to the government. It's the same old story. We've been here and we'll be here again. When I said that my mother died of an apparent overdose, what did you think? Which drug did you assume? Go ahead. Don't be shy. Anything is on the table. I won't get offended. Does it really matter? No matter what, it must have been her fault, right? My mother's life was destroyed and then ended by prescription medications. One of her previous doctors went to jail because another patient of theirs overdosed. Ironically or not, this was one of the final conversations that I actually had with her. Remember, OxyContin. FDA tested, doctor approved. It's funny, when I say that there are systemic problems in government, everyone believes me. If I say there are systemic problems in the education system, everyone believes me. If I say there are systemic problems with the prison system, corporate America, hell, if I said it with agriculture, people would probably believe me. But there is nothing systemically wrong with medicine in America that doesn't have to do with the price. You know, regulatory bodies being bribed, hostile medical practices, pharmaceutical corporations advertising directly to doctors, and then callously turning innocent people into drug addicts, while they bury their findings of adverse effects. I think that by now it's pretty clear that I have a natural distrust in doctors in general. This lucky person has had pretty bad luck with doctors in his life. You know how when you get a cavity before you get the shot of Novocaine, they're supposed to use a numbing agent in your mouth? It's usually flavored. I had a dentist who never did that once when I was like 12. So for every single cavity, I would just get the full force of a needle directly in my mouth. So if you're wondering, no, it's not the needles that make me uncomfortable. The pills that my mother were given often made her very drowsy and forgetful. And she'd often either fall asleep with or light a cigarette in her half-asleep state. And once she forgot, she turned on a gas stove. And the house would have exploded if I didn't need to come downstairs to use the bathroom. If I don't trust doctors, I have to apologize. Some of them are definitely good. This is not me saying all doctors are evil or whatever. I've read many of doctors' messages over the past 2 years, and the good ones seem to be virtually all censored by Google and the Silicon Valley corporations, because they go against the messages of the bad ones that have been controlling my life. I am a broken man. I've been trying to basically play the person that I used to be in many cases. I'm angry, I'm hurt, I'm sad, but most of all, I am just tired, and I'm wondering what about my feelings I should tell. This video would probably get banned if I don't say that you should speak to your doctor about what is right for you. Definitely don't listen to me about a vaccine. I don't care. I'm not about to give medical advice, but I mean, talking about how much doctors that were trusted fuck up my life, it probably rings out hollow. I can't tell you who to trust. I can tell you who not to trust about medical advice, and that's some dipshit on the internet thinking about the good old days, because that's the only direction you can see the sun. It's not impossible for me to trust doctors again. Hell, even the whole medical establishment of the US of A. I can think of like 25 different things right off the top of my head. But let's keep it simple with one. The simplest one. The simplest, easiest thing that the American health establishment could do to earn my trust is state openly, repeatedly, and consistently that being overweight, especially being obese, is a major risk factor for COVID complications and worse results. The fact that they have never done this means that they care about something more than public health, and that means that I cannot trust them. I know that one day, my distrust of doctors and the medical establishments of my country will put my life in jeopardy. Refusing medical care or not trusting doctors is probably the thing that will eventually kill me. Am I okay with that? I don't know. I've been in such a mind space where it's hard to really know what I'm okay with. And this video is about to get dark. Even darker. I had a conversation with someone who tried talking me into getting the vaccine months ago. It was a conversation about all kinds of things that I can't go into here on YouTube, and if it was done today, it'd probably be even bigger with more to it. At some point, I'd probably be even ranting about chickens, I'm sure. But the crux of my case was that I was at a very low risk. Not for catching COVID, but for something truly bad happening. Of course, there's the one point that's not possible to argue with. What if? What if the virus did kill me? And I'm going to say this, the darkest parts of me saw that as a positive. Now let me tell you something about me, strongly and as forward as I can. There are things about my life that I value more than my life itself, and my freedom is one of those things. I don't mean getting the vaccine takes your freedom away. That's stupid. If you spread that, or spread that I said that, you are stupid. I don't want to live in a world where I see a 12-year-old girl get peppered sprayed by police because she's not wearing a mask, and then see that get shared on the internet by people who oppose police brutality. I don't want to know the name Howard Springs, a camp where people of color, teenagers who are not sick, have been kidnapped against their will and are contained there because Australia has gone off the fucking deep end. I don't want to live in a world where half of my country worships a man who funded beagles getting their heads eaten by sandflies after their vocal cords were surgically removed. I wonder why they didn't put that in the Fauci documentary. I don't want to live in a world where I keep losing respect for every single person. Hey, remember that Kyrgyzstan video that came out at the beginning of the pandemic?
There are two futures for a pandemic like corona: fast and slow. Which future we will see depends on how we all react to it in the early days of the outbreak. A fast pandemic will be horrible and cost many lives. A slow pandemic will not be remembered by the history books.
Really now? You don't say! Good God, if this wasn't slow, then what is? What about the AIDS epidemic, which lasted several years and never really ended? This was blatantly false when this video was made. What about Dr. Mike, YouTube's own favorite doctor? Went to Florida, partied without a mask, and then tried to quote-unquote apologize about it on another channel by saying that the time he spent partying in Florida was the best psychologically he had felt all year. Then everyone seemed to defend him, so I guess I shouldn't have been surprised when he had the gall to start talking about COVID again. I could keep going. Locking down only the unvaccinated in Austria. Economies around the world are imploding, leaving experts dumbfounded. How could this have possibly happened? We just ignored literally every single rule of economics. To put this as simply as I can, I do not want to live in a world that has turned saving lives into an evil. No, I'm not suicidal. I'm just tired. Really fucking tired. I need a good long sleep, and to wake up in 100 years, when all of the people who did this are mentioned in very bad spots of the history books. I am currently 29 years old. Life expectancy for men in the United States is about 79 years. And that's basically for people who are that age now. By the time I do get there, it's probably going to be later. In October, I had to deal with 2 deaths, back to back. One was my mother. She was young, and she had me young. She died at age 45. Most people would probably agree that that was too young. The other person who died was my great-grandmother, at the other end of the spectrum. She was 93 when she died, about 2 or 3 days after my mother. As I said, life loves a sense of irony. Only in my life was it a good thing that my great-grandmother was no longer lucid, no longer cognizant in those last few days. She was a very good person. She was actually my godmother, believe it or not. In 2018, her son died, my uncle. During that time, she caught a hospital-acquired infection that nearly took her out then. In the previous 3 or 4 or whatever years, her health deteriorated. Every fall did so much damage and became an emergency. Every single disease was life-threatening. She was basically deaf by the time that she did die, and the drain of taking care of her took its toll on the entire family. Do I sound crazy if I say that I don't want to live until 93 years old? I mean, it must. Years are all that matters, right? That's what I've been told, repeatedly. This must be the truth. Years are the only aspect of life that is important. Of course I have no idea what I'm talking about. My case of COVID was super mild. I must be very lucky. My mother survived COVID. I should be celebrating. My grandmother that everyone told me to protect won a prize. She got to attend her mother's funeral and her daughter's funeral in the same week. I guess I should be grateful that this didn't happen last year, where no funerals would have been allowed. I don't know if I had the right to tell anyone to do anything, but if I had a suggestion, figure out what it is that's so valuable about being alive. Think of your family, your friends, your hobbies, and experience them. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't live your life. We can play pretend about this all we want, that we can legislate or invent or science or pray or magic immortality. But the truth of the matter is that everyone dies. The only mystery is when, and even then it's not a mystery. There really is only 2 options. You're either going to die way too soon or way too late. Your life is a mere drop in eternity. Less than 80 years out of trillions. You already gave up 2 of those very rare moments. And with Omicron, it seems like your government is going to try and charge you for a 3rd one. Do you like what you've gotten out of this deal? Why are you alive? I know why I'm alive. And in times like this, it sometimes feels like the why is the only thing that's keeping me alive. Merry Christmas, by the way. I truly hope you enjoy it.